Hello, my name's Philippa Waller.
My name is Penelope Waller, and we are two of the directors at 4D Human Being.
And welcome to the 4D Human Being podcast. What's it all about, Pen?
It's all about your personal and professional relationships. It's about your communication skills, how you lead, how you work and build teams, how you are looking after yourself and your well-being, and how you are much more at choice. What do we mean by that?
Well, sometimes we can get a little caught in patterns in life and we can all be a little bit on our automatic pilot. So 4D Human Being is all about helping us get back to choice and being a four-dimensional human being. And your fourth dimension, of course,
is intention. So whether it's about your impact, your leadership style, your team dynamics, whether it's about your well-being, whether it's about your communication or your presentation skills, anything that involves human beings interacting with other human beings, 4D Human Being are here to help.
we're going to take a deep dive and look at some tools, insights, theories that are going to help you go from a 3D human doing to a 4D human being so that you can happen to the world rather than the world simply happening to you.
Give them the old razzle dazzle, razzle dazzle. Well, that's definitely coming up loud. I think we're good there. Give them the old. So I think that would pass any sound check, Phil.
That's how we're going to open this podcast.
And all that jazz. Well, it's more interesting than testing 1, 2, 3.
Actually, that's true.
Yeah. Thank you for that little rendition on a Sunday morning. Buenos dias. Buenos dias. Oh, yes, we're going to Barcelona, aren't we?
Yeah. It's the language I don't have. What's yes in Spanish?
I think it must be C, isn't it?
Answers on a postcard. So we're really good linguistically, but that's
Spanish is the missing
that's
one,
the black
isn't it?
hole, isn't
Yeah.
it? Well, not after Barcelona.
Or Barcelona.
Barcelona.
Yeah, so we're looking forward to that. Anyway,
Exacto.
we are here today to talk more about work than play, although
Although
it comes into both.
it's a Venn diagram and our
is.
circles cross over hugely in terms of work and play.
And
we offer that
Yes, to everyone.
to everyone, exactly.
So this is another bridge episode because we're not starting our new campaign until the next podcast. So today we are talking about...
that, by the way, that noise
Oh yeah, that's the
is
scratching post-shower dog.
post muddy walk shower, and it's either a shower protest or it's a drying method. There's one wet dog.
There's another wet dog there. We've had a very wet walk today, haven't we?
Yeah, and then the sun came out when we finished.
Yeah. So today we are doing another bridge episode and we are talking about 4D training, which, given that we are 4D training, we don't talk about
Yeah.
the nuts and bolts of what we do and why we do it very
We're
often.
going back to our roots.
We are.
I think this is going to be the singing podcast. It's
going to become a musical.
Yes. Well, discuss. So exactly that. We're going to talk about, we are aware of how much we
dive
find
into the
topics
detail.
and we love, because we're so fascinated by everything to do with human beings, human development, communication between human beings, relationships, etc.
Human condition.
The human condition. And so we can go into all of these, down all these paths and these ideas from anywhere that's inspired from psychology to philosophy to, evolutionary theory to business, all of these things.
Yeah.
And so we thought a good bridge, a good solid podcast would be to really talk about what do we mean by communication skills training?
Yeah.
What is it that we do at 4D Human Being? Because we sometimes have clients where we've run a storytelling program and then they'll see something on the internet about us and say, oh, I didn't know that you did that or that as well. So we're going to talk about what we do, but more widely, because this is obviously for you as listeners. Why is it useful? Why come to us, I guess, on some level, or any good provider? But why is it useful? Why bother prioritizing it and putting your time there? Because that's the tough bit, isn't it, for individuals, teams and businesses?
People are busy. Companies are busy.
It's so
companies
easy
have budgets to think about. And traditionally, whether we are recruiting or whether we're thinking about promoting or we're just looking at the performance of our teams, traditionally, perhaps it can be easier to look at more of the hard skills. Let's use that terminology.
Yeah, of course.
So, what training have people got in more of those technical skills that they need? And that's all true and all good, and we need all of that. And
the thing that dictates the experience of your people and ultimately the success of your business, whether or not you've got the sort of, I don't know, digitized or mechanized business, you are still dealing with people, whether that's internally, whether that's your customers. If you're running a fairly automated business, and we've all been there, your customers cannot get in touch with another human being and then have a good experience with that human being, you've got problems, haven't you?
And you can pretty much, if you think about some of the biggest challenges that you and others face within business, you can pretty much boil most things down to communication. I mean, obviously there are some things out there in sort of systemic problems such as government policy or, financial rules.
But you've still got to advocate for those with communication.
You've still got to communicate your way through that. So very often we ask people, don't we, at the beginning of a training session, who here would consider themselves a professional communicator? And not many hands go up. And then we'll say, well, what do you spend most of your time doing? Communicating. And it's very, very often, if not always, where things start to break down. And yet in terms of investment from companies,
it can slide off.
Slide off.
It's a bit like our diaries and going to the gym, isn't it? It's true though, isn't it?
Should be a priority.
And I remember reading that article. It really shifted me, and I guess that's what we're trying to do. We would love to do with this conversation. I remember reading an article written by a CEO who'd found I think he'd hit a certain age. He, as a lot of us do, found that his diary was constantly packed, and the thing that got squeezed every single time were his trips to the gym. And he made a decision to completely reverse his prioritization on his diary, and of course had just noticed huge changes in his energy levels, his capacity, his well-being, his way of being with people. And so that's really our offer, is actually, as we talk about this, what would it be like to put this at the top of the list and see what gifts keep on coming and the ripple effect. And just to say right up front, if you're listening to this and you know us, this could be a really good podcast to send to somebody that in your network
who hasn't met us.
Exactly, because we're going to go right back to kind of who we are and what we do. And for those of you who do know us, we'll add in some nice bits and pieces along the way, some tips and ideas along the way. So 4D Human Being, absolutely. Firstly, it did not grow from a place of let's build a business and have a corporation that makes money. Like, it never came from there. It absolutely came from a passion around communication, and that being the bullseye of life. That it's interesting, as I was thinking about this podcast, I was thinking about one of our programs, and one of our digital programs now is well-being. Now, while that's a program and there's loads of amazing tools in there around how you can really manage stress and difficult relationships, I was thinking about even your well-being. Like, you cannot separate what we do in terms of communication skills, interpersonal dynamics, from everything, from how you feel in yourself, your own narrative around yourself, what your relationships are like, not just at work, how you get on with your family, how you bring up your kids, or you interact with your nieces or nephews or your neighbours. Like,
it all starts from there.
It all starts. What the perception that you have of yourself in your head and your own internal narrative, and then how you show up with another human being, how you open your mouth, the conversation you start having, the language you use, the expression on your face, the body language you're demonstrating is going to completely change your experience, their experience, your relationship, and what happens next, isn't it?
Yeah, and this is why we so often talk about from the inside out and from the outside in. And it's why we bring into our work the world of business, the world of psychology, the world of human development, and the world of theatre, because it's both. It's in terms of how you show up, how you communicate, how you impact the world, exactly as you said, how you create the experience for yourself and for others, and how you are ultimately successful. It's both what you're doing on the outside, which we give you wonderful tools for, and it's what's going on the inside, sort of the part of the iceberg below the surface, if you like, whether that's your well-being or your internal narrative, all these things.
Your beliefs about yourself and other people.
Yeah, so we work from both of those perspectives, which are quite deep, really, conceptually, and we make it very practical and a lot of fun in terms of how we actually do what we do.
Well, we're both actually, I won't say this about you, but the other place that 4D came from when Tom and I first set it up was two very impatient people. So, we haven't got time to think, well, here's a tool, but it'll take you 3 years to master. Yeah.
And you'll need to read this voluminous
book and manual. You need to sort of go, exactly, endless sort of decades long training, and you'll be able to use this tool in 3 years' time. I want to walk out of a conversation with a tool in my hand that I can walk into a room immediately and completely change the dynamic.
And that really is the ethos of what we do around all of our learning and development and our training. And in fact, I had a really interesting conversation with another consultant last week who had seen our work at a big corporate conference that she was doing. She was organising a different part of it.
And you'd done a session.
We'd done a session in this conference, and her mouth was sort of agape in terms of really seeing in the work that we do the bridge between the strategy and the conceptual ideas around how you want your people to be behaving and communicating, and the bridge between that and giving them tools to actually do it and embody it. And that's we do all the conceiving and the ideas and the values.
Do the hard work. We do the whole.
And one of the main reasons we get called in is the bridge of behaviours.
Exactly.
And tools.
Yeah. One of the questions we ask is, and even if you're listening to this, and if you're a team leader, you're in a team, or you're an L&D lead or HR, or you're a CEO, and you can identify the problem in a relationship, in a team, or in a whole culture, a whole organisation, even if you know what's going on, the difference between that and putting something into action. So we've done all of that work in understanding, and you might have done some of that work in understanding, definitely your own culture, and we'll meet you there. What we are really good at is working with your people so that they can walk out of the door and change it.
So whether it's something quite targeted, so for example, presentation skills, which we very commonly get called in for, or whether you want your team to be much better storytellers, whether that's internal stories or whether that's for pitching to clients, or whether you're looking for team communication and collaboration to be better, or if you're looking for your culture of your business to be better, or if you're looking for your leadership team to be much more awake and aware in terms of how they're communicating internally within the organisation.
Crossing those silos, we're going to talk about
anything at all around communication. It's so broad in terms of where you see that showing up and falling down within your organisation. Think really broadly in terms of communication skills and what that means for your organisation. It can be on a stage, but it can equally be relationship dynamics.
Well, exactly. And if you've got any feeling of like, things just could be better here, literally anything around that we would help with. You're walking into rooms, or you're having interactions, or you're receiving emails. I mean,
and I'm not seeing the values show up.
I'm not seeing this. I'm not seeing it lived and breathed. And of course, it's when we talk about its communication, it's literally everything that happens to human beings. It's email, it's your message channels in your organization.
It's the lack of
and you know what it is? And again, it goes back to where this came from. This came from such a passion around how can we live our best life? How can work feel engaging and exciting and interactive? How can we feel connected and motivated so that we can be creative? Because to live a life where you've wasted so much time being unhappy, upset, negative, misunderstood because of an email that was written poorly. It's just such a waste of everyone's time. And if you're running a business, that is not how you want your people spending their energy, is it?
Absolutely.
So
what do we do?
So to list the sort of drop downs, it's interesting because I think I've said this before. Shout out to the lovely Jeremy Bevan, if you're listening, Jeremy. Your name came up very recently with another lovely colleague. I did some work a number of years ago with Jeremy, went with his leadership team. And he said to me afterwards, he said, what you do is so amazing, but it's quite difficult to explain, to put it into one sort of nugget, because it's so experiential. And in fact, this might be a really good time before you and I actually do try and describe it, is I heard a really good analogy around the difference between hearing about, wanting to know what something's like, and actually experiencing it. And it's like going to a restaurant and reading the menu and thinking you've had the meal. You definitely haven't had the meal. You've literally read words, otherwise you would just eat the menu. Or you're looking over at another table and seeing other people really enjoying the meal and thinking that you've had the meal. And of course you haven't had the meal. You've got to eat that meal to really know what it tastes like. So when people say to us, well, can you describe to you what it feels like to be in a 4D training? We can give it a go, but it's like a menu, or it's like you reading a menu, or you asking the person who's been on a 4D training to tell you. You can definitely get a sense of it.
But you really want to be tasting that food.
And how often do you look at a menu and think, I'm not sure that's for me. Then your friend has it and you taste it. You go, oh my God, that's amazing. But you cannot know it.
And that is why we 99% of the time get referred word of mouth. Yeah, that's what happens when people say, you've got to get them in, you've got to get them in. So what do we do? Let's start with kind of the who. So we run training programs and coaching, and it can be from 1-to-1, which we do a lot. It can be from 1 to a few, which can be either a collection of delegates from across a company, or it can be 1 to a specific team, and that can be 8, 10, 16, 20, 30 people. And we do 1 or 2, we sometimes have 2 facilitators, to hundreds or thousands. So that could be, for example, a team offsite or a corporate event or conference.
And in fact, we've just literally yesterday gone live on another drop down on our website, which is big group experiences, because again, that's definitely an area where we've worked with a team, we work with a workshop, which will tend to be, like you say, 10, 12 people. And people don't know that we can replicate that experience for 80 people, 100 people. And it's very, very experiential. And people really do have a sense of having had some real development and training and tools, even in bigger groups, but we're good at it. You know how to do it.
So that's the kind of who we do it to. And we do it online. We've done massive conferences online as well. And we do it increasingly now even more face-to-face, back in the room, as we say. And in terms of the topics that we cover, what we deliver, again, it's pretty broad. We very often will do pieces around impact, executive presence, some core communication skills. Storytelling is a really fun one to do, particularly in big conferences. That's great fun to do.
Well, I tell you what, that is one I've definitely, and I've been doing this for a long time in many different ways. And I've been a storyteller, am a storyteller, scriptwriter, improviser. And I've seen the danger with storytelling is that you get the bells and whistles in and it's all glossy. And they tell great, you have a sort of good experience in terms of
with a facilitator telling a good story. Maybe.
But your people don't leave able to tell good stories because, again, it's what we said at the beginning. You need people who understand that they're taking 1-2 decades of experience and distilling it down into something that your leaders are actually going to use. Are they going to read the great big doorstopper of the 7 plots, the 7 key plots of storytelling? Are they going to read Robert McKee? Are they going to, read any number of, the hero's journey or whatever it is? Probably not. So what we come in with is 1 or 2 super simple, incredible models that if you follow immediately, as we've had people do immediately after a conference where they've used our story structure to tell a story and they go off and win storytelling competitions like that. You want people who understand that what I hand you, you can actually apply.
Yes. And it also, just to sort of put anyone's mind at rest who's thinking, that I'm not a storyteller, I don't know how I'd get my team to be storytellers.
That's your narrative.
That's what I was going to say. We have very different backgrounds in terms of the directors at 40 Human Beings. So you come from a background of performance. Matt comes from a background of sales and theatre direction. I come from a background very much of business and leading teams. So we all have different backgrounds, and yet with our background, with the tools, we can stretch into any kind of different area very quickly because they're so applicable.
Exactly. So storytelling, obviously impact, as you said, team dynamics.
Improvisation we often do a lot of, because lots of people don't feel confident communicating in the moment, spontaneously.
Yes. Oh goodness, what we do see a lot of is a lot of communication energy spent scripting for big presentations or conferences that could be done in a much more effective, simplified way. We also, of course, look at challenging conversations. We've got an amazing feedback model, how to deal with conflict when you've got people who you think are difficult. Actually, that can absolutely just reduce the enjoyment of your work so dramatically. And this all, of course, then feeds into well-being. When we think about well-being, we're often talking about stress, we're often talking about anxiety. Of course, there are other things that can come into that, and that, there's a line between what we might offer through a corporate, through our business, and therapy. But when it comes to well-being, so much of it has stemmed from inability to set boundaries, the inability to have the conversation with the difficult person or the difficult situation where you feel you're being taken advantage of, or you're people pleasing, or you're overworked. I mean, this is what I'm dealing with all the time, even in the therapeutic setting, is about, at some level, your own self-perception and your and your ability to communicate to the world what is okay for you and what's not okay for you. And so it all ties in, which is why the well-being is such a beautiful integration. So we have well-being, which isn't getting all your leaders laid on a yoga mat and breathing, although that is really super brilliant, but it's really, really practical. How can you self-regulate? How can you manage when your ego gets triggered?
How can you be much more aware of where your body is going emotionally, and what might happen when you need to take some time out, what your body's trying to tell you,
what your capacity is, where you need to set boundaries. So really, really practical, so that you're not ending up with a lot of people off work.
Absolutely. So both to enable you to communicate better with yourself in terms of your well-being, but also helping leaders and managers have those conversations with their teams around well-being as well.
And I want to wrap this with, of course, we also do keynotes, so we don't just help you do those things, we also come in and engage your people in conferences and events. And there's one other piece I want to mention on this, which brings together what I was just talking about, which is neuro depth coaching, which is being really taken up a lot now, which is if you feel you've got colleagues or leaders who are really in a maybe quite a deep rooted pattern, or maybe they've even had coaching, but you're not seeing changes in behavior, then probably there's something much more deep rooted there that they're holding on to. And that's around fear. And it's completely normal. It's about how we've learned to be and what's safe. And so the neuro depth coaching is a beautiful integration of therapeutic techniques and coaching, which goes even deeper in terms of maybe there's been trauma, or maybe there's been some kind of history that has got your leaders locked into a certain behavioural pattern or dynamic, which means that they've hit a ceiling.
Which we all have. It's just how dramatic,
or how much is impeding,
how much is
impacting
the teams in a negative way. And, whether it's neuro depth coaching, or whether it's sort of leadership or communication impact coaching, or whether it's workshops or conferences, the programs that we offer are a real gift to the individual. And they're also a real gift to your company in terms of the culture and the performance there. And we offer programs around other areas, such as interview techniques, or
influencing.
It could be influencing. It could be network, personal profile. So what's the brand of your leaders? How are they talking to other people, both internally and externally within the company?
How are people talking about them? Because your people is your company.
That's right. How would people talk about your board of directors? What's their brand and reputation out there? Because it starts with how they're communicating. So many, many different areas in terms of
anything to do with the human being.
The human being communicating with another human being. So very broad range in terms of what we offer, and in terms of the sort of number of people that we offer it to, and the kind of context that we offer it in. And then
why bother? Why bother bringing in training? Why invest? And there's plenty of stats. So we'll kind of give a few stats here. But, headlines is, you want to build better teams. You want to prevent misunderstandings and conflict. You want to improve your customer service. You want to improve collaboration. You want your meetings and your interactions between people to actually achieve the goals.
result in something.
I mean, it's just so much time wasted. You want much more innovation, of course, and creativity. And it's an offer to your people for their own individual career prospects.
Yep.
Learning about your personal strengths. We work from a place of strengths. That feels really important to say. We've even been brought in after other training providers have come in, where people have ended up feeling slightly maybe picked apart. Whereas we come in and we'll talk from build from a strengths base.
It's a really good point. And we talk about the fact that you can spend so much energy doing particular tasks, or tasks in a certain way that just don't suit your strengths or your cognitive processing style.
Yeah.
You'd be I know you don't necessarily love the word productivity, Phil, but you'd be much better off.
Creative productivity.
You'd be much better off if your team and workforce know themselves well, know their strengths, know how they can kind of best operate in a team. You're going to get more out of them.
Because then they'll know where they add the most value to your organisation, which is what you want.
And people want to do that.
People want to do that, exactly. So a few stats. We could go on and on, because you know how easy it is to find a stat. But there are plenty of statistics around communication. I mean, the other thing to say is people don't leave companies, they leave bosses. It's so vital in terms of retention.
Yeah.
So 86% of employees and executives cite a lack of collaboration or ineffective communication for workplace failures. I mean, if you just took that stat alone, for workplace failures, 86% of those come down to poor collaboration or communication.
That certainly ties in with exit interviews that we've been able to see from organisations. And unfortunately, the exit is too late. They've exited.
Well, also, the exit is a real teller, because when people are exited from a company, that is when the dial goes right up on how poor the communication is, because that is when people feel like they've suddenly been told that they won't be working at that company anymore, and it's tumbleweed.
Yeah.
There's nothing.
Yeah.
And actually, I don't think that that's an anomaly. I don't usually sort of think, well, it was 100% amazing communication, but then when they left the company, it dropped off a cliff. Usually that's indicative
of what's going on,
because it takes courage. And that's another word that we use a lot. It takes courage to step in and communicate. 70% of people believe that wasted time is one of the worst consequences of poor communication. Could not agree more. We're only here for a finite period. Let's use it well, everyone. 84% of employees rely on their manager for communication to at least some degree. That's definitely true, if not 100. 70% of global employers indicate that communication is the most desirable skill for potential recruits.
And I was having a conversation today as we had a lovely dog walk with some family members. Obviously, we've got a lot of technology coming down the track. We've got AI coming down the track. Things are going to start to shift and move in terms of what we do versus what machines and computers do. And our communication skills are one of our greatest gifts as human beings in terms of what we have and the nuances that we have around communication skills. That and many other soft skills are going to be really, really important skills for employees to have. So you really want to be skilling up your workforce in this area.
Well, also, Pet, it really makes me think, and I know this is such a sort of passion point for you, that here we are going through our education system. The reason I say this is you'll know because of what I say next. You get your tick and your certificate for doing your work so well.
Yeah.
And that will get you to some extent in the door career-wise, although less and less now, because often now, even your first interview, you're doing a presentation, aren't you? You're communicating. But even fairly early on in career, what we see a lot of, and even at executive level, we still see it, that people get very upset because they believe they work in a meritocracy, and by that I mean in a task meritocracy.
That your work will
that I've done all my work,
itself.
I've ticked the box, and I've got my results. All right, I haven't walked the floor and spoken to anybody for 3 months because I've been busy working.
I don't know half the sales team.
Yeah, exactly, and I couldn't go to that particular birthday party.
But I've done my work.
Why has Bob been promoted? I cannot tell you how often we see this, and it's not about not being good at your work. It is about finding that balance, that if you are not walking the floor and interacting with people, you are going to hit a career ceiling. Like, there is 100% guarantee on that. If you look at global, regional or global leaders that you admire, start listening to their voice, watching their body language, observing how what they communicate, and you are not going to see many people, I mean, like 1% of people at a high level who are poor communicators. You're just not.
No. And also they're often very well networked. They're very aware of what their brand and their reputation is. They are easy to pick up the phone to. They can connect you with other people. And like there's a reason they're in that position,
because when they go to a barbecue with their friends on a weekend, the way that they shake hands over the barbecue and as they eat their burger means that person they've just met wants to do business with your company.
Exactly.
And that is who your business wants to be represented by out in the world. Like, it's not a nice add-on.
No, it's not.
I can't stress it enough.
No, it's not. We often talk about the emotional dimension in the work that we do, and how, going back to what you said about I've done my work. I was definitely like that back in the day. But we are human beings, and we don't tend to operate, as rationally as we think we do. We make decisions from the emotional dimension, and then we justify them with our our rational brains. We are emotional beings. So it's relationship and communication sit at the core of your success. Whether you think that the world should operate like that or not, it is how the world operates.
Well, one of the first sort of taglines we had, I think, in one of the first videos we ever made for 4D Human Being was, you are not the story that you keep locked in your head. You're the story that you tell to the world. And the thing about that, I think it was slightly punchier than that, but that's the idea of it. And the point being that, if you're amazing at what you do and you're, passionate about it and focused and very results driven, if that is not communicated in a way that, exactly as you said, Pen, makes someone feel it, then it doesn't matter how passionate you are or, good at your job or, a unique perspective you have on the world. You are not the story you keep locked in your head. You are the story that other people can experience and share.
And this is a super segue.
Yes.
Rack me up a super segue, Laura.
Go on, Laura. Let's hear it.
This is a super segue to the how we do what we do, because
yes, we have to do that.
We understand this, and therefore we have to do and be this. So we walk the walk of what we know about human beings and how we actually operate out there in the real world. So we want to be with people that kind of pull us in energetically, and we look at them and think, they're good to be with. I want some of that. I want to be able to communicate like that. Be that, like we said in our last podcast, be the thing that people want to see. And that has to feed through into how your organisation does what it does. And it definitely feeds through in 4D in terms of how we do what we do.
Well, and sometimes if people haven't worked with us and we're on a kind of briefing call and getting kind of, a sense of what they're looking for, one of the things that can come up in some cultures, not all cultures, but some, is, but the thing about our executive or our leadership is, they're very busy. They might walk out the door. They'll probably, get on their phones or their email. Like, how are you going to keep them engaged? And we'll just say, you tell us what you need.
Yeah.
That's our job.
Yeah.
That's what we do. And we don't need to sit at the front of the room at the beginning of the day and give a set of rules about put your phones away and you're not to leave the room. Our job is to make sure that nobody wants to leave that room.
Totally. And 99% of the time.
And we love nothing more than a folded arms at the beginning of the day.
And then
at the end of the day, they're like, oh my God.
Yeah, and they say 99% of the time they say, this should have had longer. This should have been 2 days. And you're like, I know.
And we should have had it 10 years ago. I mean, how many times do we hear that? Exactly. It wasn't long enough. It's never long enough. And that's our job. We want to leave your people wanting more and feeling really energized and inspired.
Totally.
So if we think about the how, it's both in terms of what it feels like to work with us and literally how we deliver it. So what it feels like to work with us is energized, fun, engaging. It's very efficient time-wise. It's super collaborative.
On your feet.
It's interesting. So we'll give enough of the science, just a kind of nugget of it that you get it, like you understand what's happening in the brain or the nervous system or the body, whatever it is, and the connection and why the tool works. And then we'll give the tool practice and then look to apply. And what we want to do is, with our own energy, is create that field, because we're also modeling what we are, what we're giving to your leaders, because we want to leave them with the ability to walk into a room and energize and motivate your people, and also to feel like they can do it.
And we're very aware in terms of that, in terms of feeling that they can do it. We hold the balance between the stretch just slightly outside of the comfort zone, because we need people to be trying out different things and communicating differently, whilst holding people absolutely safe.
Absolutely.
So it's not a training environment where you feel embarrassed or you don't feel you can get up and do something. It's a really, really safe held environment, and there's a lot of stretch in there as well. And that is the balance you want to create in training.
Yeah, and that's also partly about the combination of all of the background and the paths that have led us here, isn't it? From acting and performance to scripting and storytelling to being in business and corporation, and all of our understanding on human psychology and development. That bing, we've got an email coming in. It's a holiday there, a hotel. Are we going? That it's both understanding as a performer how you want to walk out onto a stage and make an impact, And it's also understanding as psychotherapists, counselors, psychologists, how you keep people safe. Yeah. Because once you've triggered that feeling of this doesn't feel, I do not feel in a safe space, you're never going to learn anything. The very best learning is feeling safe enough to stretch in a kind of playful, engaged, fun way while keeping the prefrontal cortex online so that we understand why we're doing this, what's happening. So it's going right through the brain system.
And I'm going to pick up on the word play because that is so core to a lot of the work that we do in terms of how we do it. So there's lots of play, there's lots of games that are very relevant. They're to get an experience and also then apply in terms of the learning to your communication or leadership, whatever it might be. And if you're sitting there thinking, I don't know if my senior executives will want to play, trust me. Everybody wants to play, and it's such a shame that as we become adults,
it's the best way you learn.
Yeah, particularly in the corporate world, we see less and less play, and it's so wonderful for learning, collaboration. It's so wonderful for creativity. It's so wonderful for the brain state in terms of what the brain can then take in, and people love it.
They love it. And it's always the bit that say we wanted more of that. Just to be clear, this isn't about getting people to play Twister or put on or put on silly hats. But what I was thinking about as you were just talking there, Pen, was if you were putting together a dinner party, you'd want to get all of your guests really relaxed so that they could feel comfortable with each other and enjoy some really good conversation, and whether that be kind of because it's so interesting or because they were making each other laugh. And to in any way think that training and development, bar the alcohol, should be different. You want people to feel relaxed, open and collaborative in the same way that you would host a party.
Absolutely.
The other how, of course, which is probably one of the last pieces that we'll talk about today, is literally how is it delivered? And because of where we are now digitally, we are so thrilled. I mean, it's been such an incredible journey for us that we now are able, because of the digital platform we have, 4D OnDemand, to really offer a full cascade through your whole organization. So if we think vertically and horizontally for your individual, for you or for an individual delegate, it's not a question of sort of dipping in, doing a course with people you've never met before and dipping out and then forgetting it. For us, it's absolutely about that journey and experience. So when you work with 4D, you're in an experience where we will take you from, right, this is who we are, this is what this is going to be about, what do you need, into the experiential. Here are the tools and tips, and whether it's online or live or coaching,
or digitally,
here are your tools, and then we'll hold you in the next phase of staying in touch with you, practicing motivational videos. We'll give you those nudges where you need them, nice and light, just what you need, and then you've got the whole access to our whole digital suite, which means that you can continue that learning journey and that 4D experience with even more programs. So if you've done impact, you'll also have access to the digital storytelling and well-being.
And you've got the tools, you've got the exercises and applications, you've got the motivational videos and follow-up from us. Like it's all there in a very tangible, practical, tools-based package. From when you first meet 4D right through to the continuing the journey, it's all there. We are so passionate about people doing something with it that we've got a whole journey that people go through to keep
to embed and sustain.
And even if somebody just picks 2 tools that they're going to play with, that is going to start steering their ship in a different direction.
Absolutely. And then the vertical piece, of course, is from top to bottom. So we work with CEOs and board and SVPs, executive, right through to team leaders, teams, organizations. And because of the digital platform now, we can offer it to absolutely everybody in your organization. So you can have everybody talking the same language, everybody understanding the same tools. It means that you've got a real shortcut when it comes to difficult conversations or team energy or dynamics, because they've all got the same language. And that makes it really, really cost effective as well for you.
Yeah.
For if you've got an organisation with 70,000 people, they can all have access to this now. I mean, I just think that's so wonderful.
And it's quick and easy.
Yeah.
Like they don't all have to spend 3 weeks on a training program, although that's also nice to do.
I mean, I'd like to. But exactly. It's easy. It's quick. It's video modules. It's while they're on the train coming into work, they can watch a quick 10-minute video. They can get that tool and they can walk into the meeting in a completely different way.
And as I was talking to somebody about this the other day, we are really here to support getting a brilliant 4D communication culture right through your organisation. So
print that on a t-shirt.
Yeah, so it's not necessarily, I mean, for some organisations, they do just want us to go in and run a couple of days training, or they want us to go in and do a big conference and that's it. And that's absolutely fine. We also do that really nice experiential pieces for your team offsites. And if you're looking for more of an embedded communication change or cultural change within your organisation, 4D Human Being can run like a thread right through your organisation so that it just becomes part of the day-to-day.
And I think that's a really nice, pop me a super segue, Laura. A final super segue. That I was just sitting here thinking that one of the first kind of massive shifts in my life and I analyze my own life in 4 dimensions. So physical, emotional, intellectual, and intentional, particularly the intentional, of course. Was I really being intentional about my life? And where was I and where did I want to go? And it was like doing a sharp right-hand turn in my life, completely changed how I thought, changed what I knew was possible. It gave me a practical map. And of course, there's so many tools within that of literally understanding the way that you walk into a room is going to change the game. It's going to change your life. So
it's a really good point. There's a real solid map that sits underneath all of the work that we do. The tools are brilliant. Absolutely. They are so practical and applicable. And what sits underneath that is a very solid foundation.
It is built on
a model of how human beings operate in the world and the choices that they have.
Yeah. 4D Human Being is built on, like it's got a solid concrete base, isn't it? It's so solid. Yeah. So, all right, that's probably the most sort of promotional podcast we've done. But now there it is. So this is the podcast that really is saying, right, this is who we are. This is what we do.
Go share it with your colleagues and friends.
Have a conversation. Don't put up with months and years of griping and it being irritated with each other or feeling like people just write terrible emails to each other or don't have the conversations. That's one of the big ones. Get in touch. We're always here to talk. It doesn't even have to lead to anything. We love this work. We're here for a conversation. Yeah. Give us a call. Look after yourself. Step in. Give it a go.
Get communicating.
Yeah, take care and be the 4D human being that you can be.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode of the 4D Human Being podcast. We hope you enjoyed the show.
Do take on board some of the insights, tools and tips, because every time that you try something new to get back to choice, you are making a vote for the you that you want to become. And I love that phrase, Pen.
I do too. And please do share this episode with somebody that you know would really benefit from the lessons and learnings we've been chatting about today.
And of course, if you're interested in more from 4D Human Being, do get in touch. We run workshops, trainings, online, in person, conference events and keynotes. We've got the 4D OnDemand platform for your whole organisation. And we do have a free Essentials membership where anybody can sign up for absolutely free to access some of our insights, tools and tips. So do get in touch with us if you'd like to hear more. We cannot wait to hear from you and to carry on the conversation.